The whiskey burned going down, but Commander Marcus Kane welcomed the pain. At 58 years old, his alpha wolf should have been roaring for dominance, for territory, for the pack bonds that defined their kind. Instead, it lay dormant and broken, as hollow as the man who carried it. 5 years since Northern Pass. 5 years since he had watched his son Garrett die. 5 years since his alpha had simply stopped caring whether he lived or died. The Frontier Tavern reeked of stale beer and unwashed bodies, but underneath those surface smells, Marcus's dulled senses could still detect the scent signatures that marked pack hierarchy. 2 betas playing cards in the corner, their scents calm and steady. An omega serving girl whose anxious lavender undertones spoke of a hard life in a rough establishment. And the complete absence of any other alpha presence, because even broken and drunk, Marcus Kane still radiated enough dominance that no sane alpha would challenge him in an enclosed space. The door opened, bringing mountain air and something that made Marcus's wolf stir for the first time in months. Authority. Not the political kind, but the bone-deep recognition of pack structure and royal bloodline. The young soldier who entered wore the crimson and silver of the King's Guard, and his scent carried traces of King Theron himself, marking him as someone the Alpha King had touched recently, claiming him as pack. "Commander Kane," the messenger said, his voice carefully respectful in the way that betas address dormant alphas. "His Majesty King Theron requests your immediate presence at the capital, a matter of critical importance to the kingdom and the royal bloodline." Marcus did not look up from his glass. The royal bloodline could burn for all he cared. He had given Iron Ridge 40 years and his only son. There was nothing left to take. "The king said you would refuse." The messenger placed a sealed envelope on the table with hands that trembled slightly, beta instincts screaming at him to maintain respectful distance from an unpredictable alpha. "He said to give you this and tell you that he asks not as your king, but as your brother in arms, as one alpha to another." That got Marcus's attention. Theron invoking the alpha bond they had forged over 4 decades of fighting together was not something done lightly. Among their kind, such bonds ran deeper than blood, were sacred in ways that humans could never understand. Marcus broke the seal and read words written in Theron's own hand. "Marcus, I am dying. Wolfsbane poisoning, administered over 2 years. My wolf grows weaker daily. Soon he will be too weak to sustain me and I will fade. I have perhaps 6 months left. My son Caden will inherit a kingdom that does not believe an alpha who cannot hear can lead. But you and I know that alpha strength comes not from volume, but from the bond between leader and pack. Caden's wolf is powerful beyond measure. His alpha presence would dominate any room if people bothered to sense it, rather than dismissing him because he experiences the world differently. I need you, Marcus. Need the only alpha I trust to teach my son how to lead wolves who do not yet understand that dominance transcends sound. Come because I am asking my pack brother for help. Come because you know what it means to lose a son, and I am begging you to help me ensure mine survives. Your Alpha King, your brother, Theron." Marcus read the letter 3 times. Each time, different words struck him with physical force. I am dying. Wolfsbane. My son Caden will inherit a kingdom that does not believe an alpha who cannot hear can lead. You know what it means to lose a son. His own wolf stirred again, responding to the alpha distress call buried in Theron's words. Pack brother in danger. Pack brother's heir threatened. These were primal triggers that even 5 years of grief and alcohol could not completely suppress. "When do we leave?" Marcus asked. "Dawn, Commander. We can make the capital in 4 days if we ride hard." Marcus stood, his body protesting but obeying. Underneath the deterioration of 5 years drinking, the alpha frame remained. 6 feet of lean muscle and predatory grace, a weapon that knew its purpose even when its wielder had forgotten. 3 days, Marcus corrected. An alpha does not keep his pack brother waiting when death is counting down the hours. They left as the sun set, Marcus riding toward a future he had never expected to face, toward a silent prince who might need what a broken alpha could still provide, toward purpose, if he could remember what that felt like. The capital of Iron Ridge rose from the valley like a monument to alpha dominance. The palace occupied the highest ground, traditional positioning that allowed the Alpha King to literally look down on his territory. Marcus had been born in the lower districts where omegas and betas congregated, had clawed his way up through pure alpha will and tactical brilliance until he stood at a king's right hand. The palace guards recognized him immediately. Soldiers had long memories for legendary alphas, and Marcus Kane's scent signature was burned into the collective memory of 3 generations of warriors. The Iron Wolf of Iron Ridge, they had called him. The alpha who never lost, who could coordinate pack tactics that made armies move like single organisms, who led from the front and brought his soldiers home alive. Until Northern Pass, until Garrett, the guard captain, a grizzled beta with scars that spoke of frontier service, saluted with genuine respect. "Commander Kane, the king awaits you in his private study. He asks that you come immediately upon arrival." Marcus returned the salute and followed the familiar corridors toward Theron's sanctuary. The palace smelled different than he remembered. Underneath the normal scents of cooking food and burning wood, there was something sick and wrong. Poison. The wolf's bane was so deeply embedded in the stones now that Marcus could detect it even without being near the king himself. Whoever had been poisoning Theron had been patient and thorough, introducing the toxin slowly enough that it became part of the palace's ambient scent profile, brilliant and monstrous in equal measure. The private study's guards opened doors without challenge. Inside, Marcus found his oldest friend dying by degrees. Theron had always been a powerful alpha, the kind whose presence could dominate a room simply by entering it. Now that power was fading like sunset, still visible but weakening with every passing moment. The king's scent had lost the sharp ozone edge that marked alpha vitality and taken on the musty undertones of terminal illness. But when Theron smiled, Marcus saw the young prince he had befriended 40 years ago. The alpha who had valued competence over rank, who had offered a common soldier a place in the royal guard because he recognized a kindred spirit. "Marcus," Theron said, and his voice still carried alpha command despite his body's weakness. "Thank you for coming. I was not certain you would." Marcus crossed the room and clasped his king's forearm in the traditional alpha greeting, feeling fragility beneath formal robes that could not be hidden. "Your letter was persuasive. Also, you invoked pack bond. No alpha with honor ignores that." Theron's laugh was rough but genuine. "I taught you that manipulation counts as legitimate tactics if it achieves necessary objectives. You taught me many things." Marcus settled into the chair Theron indicated, his alpha senses cataloging everything about his pack brother's condition. The poison had done systemic damage that would be irreversible even if the source was eliminated. Theron was truly dying. The 6-month timeline might even be optimistic. "How long have you known?" Marcus asked. "That I was poisoned?" 6 months. That I was dying? Nearly 2 years, though I did not understand the cause until my healers found wolf's bane traces in my blood. By then the damage was done. "Who? That is one reason I need you here." Theron's expression hardened, alpha anger burning through illness. "Someone close. Someone with regular access and deep knowledge of how to kill an alpha slowly without triggering pack defensive instincts. I have suspicions, but no proof. I need an alpha I trust absolutely to investigate while preparing my son for what is coming." Marcus studied his friend, reading the layers of concern and desperation beneath royal composure. "Your brother Valen?" Theron shook his head. "Valen is traditional, rigid in his beliefs about pack hierarchy and alpha dominance. He genuinely thinks Caden is unfit because he cannot hear. But Valen is not a poisoner or a traitor. If he wanted me dead, he would challenge me in open combat as alpha law permits. Then who benefits from your slow death? Anyone who wants the succession thrown into chaos. Anyone who believes they can manipulate a young, untested alpha. Anyone who thinks Iron Ridge would be better served by a different bloodline on the throne." Marcus felt his tactical mind engaging, analyzing threats and possibilities the way it had for 40 years of warfare. "And you want me to train Caden while hunting a traitor who has successfully operated undetected for years?" "I am asking too much," Theron admitted. "But you are the only alpha I trust with both tasks. The court is full of ambitious wolves who would use Caden to advance their own power. My generals are competent, but they do not understand that alpha dominance can manifest in ways that transcend traditional pack hierarchy." "Tell me about your son," Marcus said. "Not the court gossip. Tell me about Caden as his alpha sire sees him." Theron's expression softened in ways that only happened when alphas spoke of their children. "Caden's wolf is powerful, Marcus. Incredibly powerful. He was born deaf, yes, but his other senses compensated in ways that created something unprecedented. He reads pack dynamics through scent and body language with accuracy that seems supernatural. He can sense emotional states, detect deception, identify threats before they fully manifest. His tactical mind is brilliant. And his alpha presence, when he chooses to project it, can dominate betas and even younger alphas despite his age. But he cannot howl, cannot issue voice commands, cannot participate in traditional pack bonding through vocal harmonics. No. But he has found other ways. With the resonant stones, he can project his alpha will directly into pack bonds, can coordinate wolves through the deep connections that existed before language. What he lacks in voice, he compensates with presence and genuine leadership that does not require volume. Marcus considered this. An alpha heir who could not use traditional dominance displays, but had learned alternative methods. It was unprecedented, and anything unprecedented made traditionalists nervous. You want me to teach him to survive the traditionalist who will see his differences as weakness to exploit. I want you to teach him to be the alpha he already is, just using methods that people like my brother cannot dismiss or invalidate. Theron paused, then spoke words weighted with significance. I also need him to learn from an alpha who understands that strength is not measured by how many wolves you dominate, but by how many you inspire to follow you willingly. The compliment hit harder than Marcus expected. He thought about Garrett, about the son he had raised to value courage and honor, who had died saving his father because Marcus had taught him that some things mattered more than survival. I will train him, Marcus said, but I make no promises about the traitor. Hunting someone this patient and careful may take longer than 6 months. Then train my son well enough that he can finish the hunt himself after I'm gone. Theron's smile was bittersweet. Caden will need loyal alphas around him, Marcus. Wolves who see his potential rather than his limitations. Will you be one of those wolves? Marcus met his pack brother's eyes and felt the alpha bond between them pulse with significance. I will serve your heir as I served you, until death or release from duty. Theron nodded, satisfied. Then let me introduce you to the future Alpha King of Iron Ridge. They moved through palace corridors that Marcus knew by heart, passing servants and guards who averted their eyes from 2 alphas radiating purpose and power. Even dying, Theron commanded respect through sheer force of presence. And Marcus, despite his years of self-imposed exile, still moved like the predator he had always been. The training grounds were occupied when they arrived. Marcus's alpha senses cataloged everything immediately. 12 soldiers running formation drills, their pack coordination smooth, but not exceptional. A weapons master overseeing practice bouts. And standing at the edge of the grounds, perfectly still, but radiating focused attention, a young wolf who could only be Prince Caden. 16 years old, and already showing the build that would develop into full alpha physicality. Dark hair, amber eyes that tracked every movement on the training ground with predatory precision. He wore practice armor that looked well used, suggesting regular training rather than ceremonial appearance. But it was the prince's scent that made Marcus's wolf sit up and take notice. Caden smelled like thunderstorms before they broke, like ozone and electricity, and the particular charge that filled the air when something powerful was about to happen. His alpha signature was not loud or aggressive in the way that young alphas usually projected their dominance. Instead, it was deep and steady, the kind of presence that did not need to announce itself because it simply was. Marcus had known powerful alphas, had fought beside and against some of the most dominant wolves in living memory. Caden's scent signature was different, but not lesser. It was condensed somehow, focused inward rather than projected outward, waiting for the moment when it would be unleashed. A woman approached Caden from his peripheral vision, moving carefully so he could see her coming. Marcus's alpha senses fixed on her immediately, and his wolf responded in ways that made his breath catch. Omega. But not a submissive, broken thing cowering from alpha attention. This Omega moved with quiet confidence, her scent signature complex and layered in ways that spoke of intelligence and capability far beyond what most alphas expected from her designation. She was perhaps 35, with brown hair pulled back in a practical braid, and green eyes that held both warmth and calculation. Her scent was chamomile and wild sage, calming and healing with undertones of something sharper that Marcus could not immediately identify. When she spoke to Caden, her hands moved in complex patterns. Sign language, Marcus realized. The prince responded in kind, their conversation silent but clearly understood by both parties. Then the Omega turned and her gaze swept across Marcus before stopping. For one eternal moment, their eyes met and Marcus's wolf howled with recognition that he had not felt in 20 years. Not since his mate had died in childbirth, bringing Garrett into the world. Fated mate. The scent connection slammed into him with physical force, making his alpha instincts roar with possession and protection and need. This Omega, this stranger whose name he did not even know, carried the scent that called to something primal in his wolf. From the way her eyes widened and her sense spiked with shocked awareness, she felt it too. Marcus forced himself under control through sheer discipline. He was 58 years old, not some young alpha who let his wolf dictate his actions. Fated mates were rare enough to be mythical, and finding one at this stage of his life, when he had nothing to offer but broken pieces, seemed like cruel cosmic humor. The Omega recovered her composure quickly, offering a respectful nod before continuing toward the palace. But Marcus could smell the lingering traces of her scent even after she disappeared from view, and his wolf whined with the need to follow, to claim, to establish the bond that fate had apparently decided was his. "That is Elena," Theron said quietly, his tone suggesting he had noticed Marcus's reaction and understood its significance. "She came to the palace 3 years ago, presenting herself as an Omega healer with knowledge of ancient remedies. Caden trusts her completely. She was the one who brought the resonance stones and taught him how to use them." Marcus forced his attention back to the king. "She is Pack? Officially, she serves the royal household as a healer. Unofficially," Theron's expression grew thoughtful. "I have always suspected she was more than she appeared. Omegas with her level of education and confidence are rare. But she has been invaluable to Caden, and I have learned not to question gifts when they serve my son's interests." Marcus filed that information away for later consideration. Right now, he needed to focus on the prince, not on the Omega who had just turned his carefully controlled world upside down. Caden had noticed their arrival. He turned to face them fully, and Marcus got his first direct experience of the young alpha's presence. It was like being scanned by something that saw deeper than surface appearances, that read pack bonds and alpha signatures with the precision that most wolves read visual cues. The prince's hands moved in sign language, and Marcus wished he understood what was being conveyed. Then Caden's expression shifted to something that might have been amusement, and he reached into a pocket to withdraw a smooth stone that gleamed in the afternoon light. Marcus felt the resonance stone activate before he understood what was happening. Suddenly there was a presence in his mind, not invasive but clearly there, and with it came words that did not pass through ears but landed directly in understanding. "Commander Kane." The voice was Caden's, young but carrying alpha authority that transcended age. "My father has told me about you. The iron wolf who could make armies move like pack hunts. The alpha who led from the front and never lost a soldier he did not have to lose. I am honored that you would come to train someone the court dismisses as broken." Marcus reeled from the directness of the communication. This was not telepathy in any mystical sense, but something that worked through pack bonds, through the deep connections that all wolves shared but few knew how to access deliberately. "I do not train broken wolves," Marcus sent back, uncertain if he was doing it correctly, but letting his alpha will shape the thought. "I train warriors who are willing to learn." "Are you willing, Prince Caden?" The young alpha's smile was fierce and approving. "Show me what you can do, old wolf. Prove you are worth learning from." Marcus felt himself grin for the first time in 5 years. This was not a frightened child needing protection. This was a young alpha challenging him to demonstrate competence, to earn respect through capability rather than expecting it through reputation. The war room where Caden led him was set up with a detailed relief map showing the northern pass. Marcus recognized it immediately. This was the battle where Garrett had died, recreated with extraordinary accuracy. The prince's hands moved rapidly, and through the resonant stone connection, Marcus heard his words clearly. The official reports call this a victory. Iron Ridge held the pass, and enemy forces were repelled. But I have studied the casualty ratios, the tactical decisions, the timing of engagements. This should not have cost as many lives as it did. Tell me where the plan failed. Marcus studied the map, seeing not wooden pieces, but living wolves who had trusted his leadership and died because he had missed something critical. Where did you get information detailed enough to recreate this? I have spent 3 years studying every major engagement in the past decade, reading after-action reports, interviewing survivors, analyzing supply requisitions, and communication logs. The prince's mental voice carried intensity that physical speech could never match. Something has been wrong with Iron Ridge's military operations, patterns that suggest information is being leaked to our enemies. Marcus felt his alpha instincts sharpen. Show me. Over the next hour, Caden walked him through an analysis that was both brilliant and deeply disturbing. 4 major battles over 10 years, where Iron Ridge forces had encountered enemy positioning that should have been impossible based on intelligence available at the time. Where ambushes had been perfectly placed to counter tactics that were decided in supposedly secure planning sessions. Where supply lines had been interdicted at precisely the right moment to cause maximum disruption. Each incident could be explained individually as bad luck or enemy competence. Together, they formed a pattern that pointed to systematic betrayal. And there, connected to 3 of the 4 battles, was a name that made Marcus's wolf snarl with recognition: Commander Darius, the king's oldest friend, the alpha who had stood at Theron's side for 30 years. You think Darius is the traitor? Marcus said. You think he has been feeding intelligence to our enemies for a decade? I think someone has. And Darius is the only alpha with access to planning sessions for all 4 engagements. The prince's mental presence carried grim certainty. I also think whoever poisoned my father and whoever betrayed our military operations are the same wolf. The timing suggests coordination between weakening the king and creating conditions for succession chaos. If Darius is responsible, Marcus said slowly, then everything we plan will be compromised the moment he learns of it. Exactly. Which is why I have told no one else about this analysis except you and Elena. Caden's amber eyes fixed on Marcus with alpha intensity. I need wolves I can trust absolutely, wolves whose loyalty is beyond question. Are you such a wolf, Commander Kane? Marcus thought about Garrett. About the son who had died in an ambush that might have been set up through betrayed intelligence. About 5 years of guilt that might be misplaced if the real responsibility lay with a traitor who had sacrificed soldiers for unknown purposes. I am, Marcus said, letting his alpha will flow through the resonant stone connection with unmistakable sincerity. I swear on my son's memory that I will serve you faithfully and help you expose whoever has been bleeding this kingdom. Caden's expression shifted to something fierce and approving. Then welcome to the pack, Alpha Kane. We have much work to do. The sound of approaching footsteps made both alphas turn. Elena entered carrying a tray with tea and simple food, her omega scent filling the war room with calming influence that should have soothed alpha aggression. Instead, Marcus's wolf fixated on her with single-minded intensity that bordered on obsession. Mate. His. To protect and claim and bond with for life. Elena set the tray down with hands that trembled slightly, her own sense spiking with awareness that confirmed she felt the pull as strongly as he did. For a moment their eyes met again, and the air between them crackled with potential that terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. Then she stepped back, maintaining proper omega deference, though her expression suggested the submission was more strategic choice than instinctive response. Forgive the interruption, Your Highness, she said to Caden, her voice steady despite the undercurrents. I thought you and Commander Kane might benefit from refreshment after your discussions. Caden's gaze moved between them with the perception Marcus was learning to expect from the young alpha. His mental voice touched Marcus privately. You recognize her as fated mate. I can smell the bond forming even though neither of you has acknowledged it yet. Marcus sent back carefully. I am old, broken, and have nothing to offer an omega of her quality. Whatever fate intended, I will not burden her with a failed alpha. Caden's response carried amused exasperation. For a legendary tactical mind, you think like an idiot about personal matters. Elena is not some fragile omega who needs protecting from difficult choices. She is pack, and if fate marked her for you, perhaps you should trust that there are reasons beyond your understanding. Before Marcus could formulate a response, the war room door burst open. A young beta messenger, breathing hard from running, his scent carrying urgency and fear. Your Highness, Commander Kane. the beta gasped. General Valen demands immediate audience. He claims he has evidence of treason in the High Command and insists on presenting it to the king within the hour. Marcus and Caden exchanged glances weighted with significance. If Valen had discovered evidence of treason, it could expose their investigation before they were ready. Or it could be coincidence, the king's brother conducting his own inquiry. Either way, they were about to discover if their enemies knew they were being hunted. The throne room was filled with tension that made every alpha present radiate aggression barely held in check. King Theron sat on his throne, looking weary but determined, his dying alpha presence still commanding enough to keep order. General Valen stood at the center of the room, his own alpha signature aggressive and challenging as he addressed his brother. "I have evidence," Valen declared, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber, "that someone in the High Command has been compromising military operations. I demand a full investigation and public trial." Theron's expression remained carefully neutral. What evidence? Supply requisitions that do not match deployment orders. Communication gaps during critical engagements. Intelligence reports that somehow reached enemy forces before our own field commanders knew details. Valen's gaze swept the assembled nobles and officers, his alpha dominance challenging anyone to deny his claims. "Someone has been betraying Iron Ridge for years, and I will find them." Marcus stood with Caden at the edge of the throne room, both of them maintaining careful neutrality. Through the resonant stone connection, the prince sent private observation. "Valen suspects but does not know. He is conducting his investigation parallel to ours, which means our traitor will be receiving pressure from multiple directions. They may make mistakes, or they may strike first to eliminate threats." Marcus watched Valen's aggressive display and calculated odds. "Your uncle is not subtle. If the traitor feels cornered, they will move quickly. Then we need to move quicker." Caden's mental voice carried alpha determination. "The trial my uncle demanded was scheduled for 3 months from now. I propose we accelerate it. Give me 2 weeks to prove I can command wolves in actual crisis rather than simulated exercises." Marcus felt his tactical instincts screaming warnings. 2 weeks was not enough time to prepare an untested alpha for real command, but it might be enough time to force their traitor into revealing himself through rushed action. Before Marcus could respond, he caught a scent that made his wolf fixate with intensity that overrode tactical considerations. Elena, moving through the throne room's periphery, heading toward a side exit with the purposeful stride of someone on a mission. Without conscious decision, Marcus followed. His alpha could not let his fated mate walk into potential danger without protection, regardless of what his rational mind knew about her proven competence. He caught up to her in a corridor away from the throne room's crowds. Elena turned to face him, her omega scent carrying complex emotions that Marcus's heightened senses could read with painful clarity. Attraction, fear, longing, resistance. "You feel it too," Marcus said, "not a question." "I feel many things, Commander Kane." Elena's voice was steady, but her scent told a different story. "I feel the mate bond that fate has apparently decided to inflict on both of us. I feel the absolute certainty that acting on it would be a mistake that complicates everything." "Why?" "Because you are broken and grieving and not ready for the responsibility that comes with claiming an Omega mate. Because I have secrets that you would hate me for if you knew them. Because we have a traitor to catch and a young alpha to protect, and personal entanglements will interfere with both objectives." Marcus stepped closer, watching her eyes dilate as his alpha scent wrapped around her. "Every word you say is rational and correct, and none of it changes what we both know. Fate does not make mistakes about mates. Fate also does not care about timing or convenience." Elena held her ground, despite her Omega instincts that must be screaming at her to submit to nearby alpha authority. "We can acknowledge the bond exists without acting on it immediately. We can focus on keeping Prince Caden alive and exposing the wolves who have betrayed this kingdom. When that is finished, if we both survive, then we can discuss what fate intended." It was reasonable, practical, everything that Marcus's tactical mind approved of. But his wolf howled with frustration at the delay, at being denied what was rightfully his. "Very well," Marcus said, fighting to keep his alpha under control. "We focus on the mission. But Elena, understand this. I have already lost a son. I will not lose my fated mate to enemies that I could have protected her from if I had claimed her properly." Elena's expression softened slightly. "I am not yours to lose, Commander. Not yet. But I appreciate the sentiment." She turned and walked away, leaving Marcus standing in the corridor with his wolf snarling, and his mind calculating how long he could maintain professional distance from an Omega that every instinct demanded he claim and protect. The answer, he suspected, was not very long at all. That evening, Marcus met with King Theron in the private study to discuss Caden's proposal to accelerate the trial. The king listened carefully, his dying alpha still processing tactical implications with the clarity that had made him a successful ruler for 30 years. "It is risky," Theron admitted, "but the risk of waiting may be greater if our traitor decides to strike first." He studied Marcus with eyes that saw too much. "You have reservations." Marcus chose his words carefully. "Prince Caden is brilliant, tactically sound, and his alpha presence is stronger than anyone gives him credit for. But he has never commanded wolves in actual combat, never made decisions where hesitation costs lives, never experienced the weight of watching soldiers die following your orders. You did not have those experiences until your first battle either," Theron pointed out. "No alpha does. We learn by surviving mistakes or we die making them." "Garrett died making mistakes I taught him," Marcus said quietly. "Garrett died being the hero you raised him to be." Theron's voice carried alpha command that demanded truth. "You taught him courage and honor and sacrifice. He used those lessons to save his father's life. That is not failure, Marcus. That is success of the highest order. Success that cost me my son. Yes. And now you have a chance to use those same hard-won lessons to help another alpha's son survive." Theron leaned forward, his expression intense despite his weakness. "I am dying, my friend. In 6 months, maybe less, my wolf will fail and I will follow. I need to know that when I cross over, Caden will have alphas around him who will protect and guide him. Will you be one of those alphas?" Marcus thought about Elena, about the mate bond he had not asked for but could not deny, about a young prince who saw possibilities where others saw only limitations, about the chance to take all the pain and loss of the past 5 years and transform it into something that served the future rather than mourning the past. "I will serve your son," Marcus said, letting his alpha will flow through the words with unbreakable commitment. "I will train him, protect him, and help him become the alpha king that Iron Ridge needs. This I swear on the pack bond we share." Theron clasped his forearm in the traditional acceptance of an alpha's oath. "Then let us begin. 2 weeks until trial by fire. 2 weeks to transform a brilliant but untested young alpha into a commander that wolves will follow into hell." Marcus nodded, already planning training regimens and tactical exercises that would push Caden to his limits. 2 weeks to do what should take months. 2 weeks to prepare for battles on multiple fronts. 2 weeks to either prove that innovation could triumph over tradition or watch everything collapse in blood and failure. He left the king's study as night settled over the capital, walking palace corridors that smelled of old stone and ancient pack bonds, and the faint traces of Elena's scent that seemed to linger everywhere his fated mate had walked. 2 weeks until everything changed, until they discovered if a silent alpha could lead through bonds deeper than voice, until they exposed the traitor who had been bleeding the kingdom for years, until Marcus learned whether a broken wolf could find redemption through service to the next generation. The training began tomorrow. The hunt had already started, and somewhere in the palace, a traitor watched and planned, unaware that their carefully constructed conspiracy was about to face alphas who fought with strategies they had never imagined. Marcus stood at his window looking out over the sleeping capital and felt his wolf stir with purpose for the first time in 5 years. He had come here expecting to train a prince and then disappear back into the oblivion of frontier taverns. Instead, he had found a fated mate, a young alpha worth serving, and enemies worth destroying. The broken alpha was beginning to remember what it felt like to be whole, and that, Marcus suspected, would make him far more dangerous than his enemies anticipated. The training grounds before dawn belonged to alphas. Marcus stood in the center of the practice yard watching Caden work through combat forms with dedication that reminded him painfully of Garrett, but the comparison ended there. Where his son had been all aggression and forward momentum, the young prince fought with supernatural awareness that came from reading opponents through scent and pack bond rather than relying on sound. Caden's alpha presence rolled off him in waves as he moved, not loud or aggressive, but deep and undeniable, like standing near a sleeping predator that could wake at any moment. Marcus's own wolf recognized the prince as dominant pack, as an alpha who commanded respect through capability rather than volume. The past 3 days had revealed depths to Caden's abilities that conventional training never addressed. The prince could sense emotional states through pack bonds, could identify deception through scent markers that most alphas never learned to read consciously. His tactical mind processed battlefield information through multiple sensory channels simultaneously, creating understanding that transcended what eyes and ears alone could provide. But brilliance in theory meant nothing if it crumbled under the pressure of actual combat. Marcus's attention was pulled from the prince by a scent that made his wolf surge with possessive hunger. Elena approached carrying 2 mugs of coffee, her Omega presence wrapping around him like silk over steel. The mate bond between them had grown stronger over 3 days, despite both of them trying to maintain professional distance. Every time she entered a room, Marcus's alpha screamed at him to claim her, to mark her, to establish the bond that fate had declared was his right. Every time, he forced himself under control through discipline that was becoming harder to maintain. Elena offered him coffee without meeting his eyes, a defensive strategy that fooled neither of them. Her scent carried arousal and need that matched his own, the Omega's biological response to being near her fated alpha mate. But it also carried determination and the particular steel that marked Omegas who refused to let designation define their capabilities. "You are thinking too loudly," she said quietly. "Your alpha is projecting possession, and it is making the training ground uncomfortable for every wolf present." Marcus glanced around and realized she was correct. Several beta soldiers had moved to the far edges of the grounds, instinctively avoiding an alpha who was radiating territorial aggression toward an unclaimed Omega. The kind of aggression that led to challenges and bloodshed if not carefully controlled. "My apologies," Marcus said, forcing his alpha presence back under control. "Old habits. When my first mate was alive, I was better at managing pack dynamics around her." Elena's expression softened slightly. "How long has she been gone?" 23 years. She died bringing Garrett into the world. The old grief was still there, but softer now, worn smooth by time and distance. "I raised my son alone, and when he died, I thought that was the end of pack and family for me, that I would die without ever experiencing mate bond again. And then fate decided you needed complications." Elena's voice carried dry humor. "A fated Omega when you are trying to train a prince and hunt a traitor. The universe has terrible timing." "Or perfect timing," Marcus countered. "Perhaps I needed something to fight for beyond duty and revenge. Something that reminds me why we protect kingdoms in the first place." Their eyes met and held, the air between them charged with potential that both of them were trying to resist. Marcus could smell Elena's Omega responding to his alpha attention, her scent growing sweeter and more complex. One step forward, one touch, one word of claiming, and the bond would snap into place, making them mates in the eyes of wolf law and pack tradition. Elena broke the moment by stepping back, her expression carefully neutral despite her scent betraying everything. "We should focus on Prince Caden's training. The Northern Kingdom will not delay their invasion because we are distracted by biological imperatives." She was correct, as always. But Marcus's wolf howled with frustration at another denial of what should be his. Caden finished his forms and approached them, his amber eyes moving between the 2 adults with perception that saw far too much. The prince's hands moved in sign language, and through their resonant stone connection, Marcus heard his observation. "The mate bond between you grows stronger daily. Soon it will be impossible to ignore without causing both of you physical pain. You should claim her properly before biology makes the choice for you." Marcus sent back carefully. "That is not a decision to rush into. Elena deserves an alpha who can offer more than broken pieces and grief." Caden's mental voice carried exasperated amusement. "Elena is an Omega who has lived independently in a royal palace for 3 years, navigating court politics and pack hierarchies while maintaining her own autonomy. She does not need an alpha who offers her the world. She needs one who respects her enough to let her choose her own path. Perhaps you should ask what she wants instead of deciding for her." Before Marcus could respond, a commotion at the training ground entrance drew everyone's attention. General Valen strode onto the grounds with an entourage of senior officers, his alpha presence aggressive and challenging as he scanned the assembled wolves. The king's brother was a formidable alpha in his prime, built like a fortress, with silver threading through dark hair and scars that spoke of decades commanding troops in active combat. His scent carried ozone and gunpowder, the signature of an alpha who had spent his life on battlefields. "Nephew," Valen said formally, his voice carrying across the grounds, "I hear you have proposed accelerating your trial from 3 months to 2 weeks. I came to see if this was madness, or if you actually believe you are ready for such a test." Caden's response came through sign language that his translator conveyed. "Prince Caden says he is ready for whatever trial General Valen wishes to design. He says sitting in safety while others debate his fitness serves no purpose. Better to prove capability under real conditions than perfect simulations that convince no one." Valen studied his nephew with an expression that mixed skepticism and something that might have been hope. "Your confidence is admirable. But confidence without capability gets soldiers killed." The prince signed rapidly, and his translator spoke. "Prince Caden asks if General Valen has ever commanded troops without being able to rely on voice orders. If you have coordinated battles when traditional communication was impossible. He suggests perhaps both of you have limitations in your experience, and perhaps the trial will reveal who adapted and who remained trapped by assumptions." The challenge in Caden's words was unmistakable. Not disrespectful, but alpha to alpha, testing whether Valen would see past his nephew's differences to recognize genuine capability. Valen's expression shifted through surprise and anger before settling on something approaching respect. "Bold words, nephew. Let us hope your actions match them." He turned to Marcus. "Commander Kane, I trust you are preparing the prince for actual combat rather than academic exercises." "I am teaching him what 40 years of warfare taught me," Marcus replied evenly, "that battles are won by alphas who understand their wolves' capabilities and use them intelligently. Prince Caden's methods are unconventional, but warfare rewards innovation more than tradition when innovation is executed properly. We shall see." Valen's gaze swept the training ground one more time before he addressed Caden directly. 2 weeks. I am deploying to the northern frontier to assess the situation with the Northern Kingdom mobilization. When I return, we will conduct your trial at Shadow Peak Garrison. Real stakes, real consequences. If you succeed, I will support your succession. If you fail, I will demand the king reconsider the line of inheritance. It was a declaration of terms that could not be softened or avoided. Marcus watched Caden's reaction carefully, looking for fear or hesitation. Instead, the young alpha's sense spiked with anticipation and determination. The prince signed acceptance, and his translator conveyed formal words. "Prince Caden accepts General Valen's terms. He will meet you at Shadow Peak in 2 weeks and demonstrate that alpha strength comes in forms tradition has not imagined." Valen nodded once, then departed with his officers trailing behind. The tension he left in his wake settled slowly as wolves processed what had just occurred. The succession crisis had accelerated dramatically. In 2 weeks, Caden would prove himself, or the kingdom would tear itself apart over who should inherit. Elena moved closer to Marcus, her voice pitched for his ears alone. 2 weeks is not enough time. Even with intensive training, Prince Caden has never commanded troops in actual combat. Then we teach him everything we can in the time we have and trust that his natural abilities will compensate for inexperience. Marcus watched Caden returning to weapons practice, the young alpha processing the confrontation through movement and focus. "The question is whether our traitor will wait 2 weeks, or if they will move sooner to prevent the trial from happening at all." Elena's scent carried worry that confirmed his concerns. "If they move against Prince Caden directly, we need to be ready to protect him without revealing that we know about the conspiracy." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a royal messenger, a young beta whose scent carried urgency that made every alpha present tense for threat. The messenger approached Caden directly, bowing with proper respect before speaking. "Your Highness, the king requests your immediate presence in the war room. He says intelligence has arrived from the northern frontier that changes everything." Marcus and Caden exchanged glances, weighted with significance, then moved toward the palace with Elena following at the discreet distance that Omegas traditionally maintained. But Marcus could feel her presence through their developing bond, could sense her analytical mind already processing possibilities. The war room was crowded with senior officers and advisors when they arrived. King Theron sat at the head of the table, looking exhausted but grimly determined. Maps of the northern frontier covered the table, marked with symbols that indicated troop movements and strategic positions. "The Northern Kingdom has accelerated their timeline," Theron announced without preamble. "War Chief Ragnar is moving 38,000 troops toward our border. They will be in position to attack within 2 weeks, possibly sooner." The room erupted in controlled chaos as officers began discussing defensive deployments and strategic responses. Marcus studied the maps with a professional eye, noting force compositions and approach vectors that suggested this was not a raid, but preparation for sustained campaign. Caden moved to the table and began signing rapidly, his translator struggling to keep pace. "The prince says this timing is not coincidence. The northern mobilization accelerates exactly when his trial accelerates. Someone coordinated these events to create maximum chaos and opportunity for internal disruption." Several officers looked skeptical, but Marcus stepped forward in support. "Prince Caden is correct. This level of coordination between external threat and internal political crisis suggests communication between Northern Kingdom leadership and someone inside Iron Ridge. General Valen would have had access to information about the trial schedule," one advisor suggested carefully. "Valen departed for the frontier hours ago," another officer countered. "If he was coordinating with Ragnar, he would have stayed in the capital where he could exploit the chaos." Marcus watched the debate unfold while his tactical mind worked through possibilities. Valen was not the traitor. Of that he was increasingly certain. The king's brother was rigid and traditional, but he was not a betrayer of pack and kingdom, which meant whoever was feeding information to the Northern Kingdom was still here, still active, still dangerous. "Your Majesty," Marcus said formally, "I recommend we deploy a defensive force to Shadow Peak immediately. 500 garrison troops plus reinforcements. Position them to mount credible defense while the main army remains ready to respond if Ragnar's attack manifests elsewhere." Theron studied him thoughtfully. "And who would command this force?" Marcus glanced at Caden, seeing the young Alpha's expression shift to understanding and determination. "Prince Caden should command, make his trial real. If he can hold Shadow Peak against probing attacks or initial assault, he proves his capability under actual combat conditions. If he fails, we discover that before the kingdom's future depends on his leadership." The suggestion sent ripples through the room. Officers and advisors exchanged looks that ranged from horrified to thoughtfully calculating. Sending an untested Alpha Prince to command frontier troops facing imminent invasion was either brilliant or catastrophically reckless. Theron's gaze fixed on his son. "Caden, this is your choice. I will not order you into this responsibility. The risks are real. Wolves will live or die based on your decisions." Caden's response came through the resonance stone, his mental voice carrying absolute confidence. "I accept command. Give me 2 weeks and the wolves willing to trust new methods. I will hold Shadow Peak or die trying." The formal acceptance of command responsibility resonated through the war room's pack dynamics. Even skeptical officers could sense the young Alpha's determination, could feel his willingness to put everything at risk rather than hide behind safe choices. "Very well," Theron said, his voice carrying the weight of royal decree. "Prince Caden Ironwood, I hereby grant you field command of Shadow Peak Garrison. Commander Kane will serve as your tactical advisor. You will deploy tomorrow and establish defensive positions. May the pack bonds guide you." The rest of the day vanished into frantic preparation. Marcus coordinated logistics while Caden studied maps and memorized every detail of Shadow Peak's defensive positions. Elena moved through the palace gathering medical supplies and the specialized resonance stones that would form Caden's communication network. It was late evening when Marcus finally found a moment alone with Elena in the palace archives. She was researching historical battles, looking for precedents and tactical innovations that might help Caden's unconventional approach. "We deploy at dawn," Marcus said quietly. 4 days hard riding to Shadow Peak, then immediate defensive preparation. The Northern Kingdom could attack at any time after that. Elena looked up from her books, and in her eyes Marcus saw the same awareness that had been building between them for days. "We may not survive this. Shadow Peak could fall. The traitor could strike. War Chief Ragnar could prove impossible to negotiate with." "All true," Marcus agreed, "which is why I need to say something before we ride into uncertainty." Elena stood slowly, setting aside her books, her omega scent carrying complex emotions. If you are about to claim me as mate simply because you fear we might die before you get another chance, I will be very disappointed in your tactical judgment. That is not why. Marcus moved closer, watching her pupils dilate as his alpha presence wrapped around her. I need to claim you because every day we delay, my wolf becomes harder to control around you. Because the mate bond is already forming whether we acknowledge it or not. Because you deserve an alpha who respects you enough to ask rather than simply taking. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough to scent the arousal and need that she could not hide, close enough that his wolf howled with the proximity to what it wanted most. Elena, I am asking. Will you accept mate bond with a broken alpha who has more scars than prospects? Who cannot promise you easy or safe, but can promise you loyalty and protection and respect for as long as I draw breath? Elena's hand came up to rest against his chest, over his heart, and Marcus could feel her trembling. You are not broken, Marcus Kane. You are healing. And yes, I will accept mate bond. Not because we might die, but because fate marked us for each other, and I am tired of fighting what was always inevitable. The formal acceptance released something in Marcus's wolf that had been caged since his first mate's death. He cupped Elena's face gently, giving her time to refuse, to change her mind, to maintain the distance that she had insisted on. Instead, she rose on her toes and kissed him, and the mate bond snapped into place with force that staggered them both. It was not the overwhelming rush of young wolves discovering first mates. This was deeper, more complex, built on understanding and respect, and the recognition that they had both survived enough to know what they were choosing. Marcus could feel Elena's presence in his mind now, could sense her emotions and thoughts through connections that transcended physical proximity. And she could feel him, the grief he carried, the guilt over Garrett, the determination to protect Caden, the fierce love that was already growing for the Omega who had chosen to bind herself to his damaged soul. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena's scent had changed. She smelled like mate now, like pack and home and everything that alphas were biologically programmed to protect unto death. We should tell the prince, Elena said, though she made no move to step away. He will sense the completed bond the moment he sees us. Let him sense it, Marcus replied. We have 2 weeks to survive battles on multiple fronts. Having an Omega mate to protect might make me fight smarter rather than just harder. Or it might make you reckless trying to keep me safe. Elena's smile was gentle despite her words. I am not a fragile thing that needs constant guarding, Alpha mine. I have survived 3 years in a royal palace maintaining cover while investigating traitors. Trust that I can protect myself while you focus on training our prince. Marcus pulled her close again, breathing in her scent, feeling his wolf settle in ways it had not since before Garrett's death. I trust your competence absolutely, but you are my mate now, and my wolf will always prioritize your safety. That is biology, not disrespect. Then perhaps your wolf should trust my Omega instincts to know when to fight and when to flee. Elena's voice carried warmth and steel in equal measure. We are partners, Marcus. Equals who choose to support each other, not Alpha who commands and Omega who obeys. It was a radical statement of how their bond would function, rejecting traditional pack hierarchy in favor of mutual respect. Marcus's rational mind approved even as his alpha instincts growled at the deviation from expected patterns. Agreed, he said finally. Partners and equals, though I reserve the right to be irrationally protective when threats emerge. And I reserve the right to ignore your protection if tactical situation requires it. Elena kissed him again, softer this time. Now let us inform Prince Caden that his tactical advisor has just completed mate bond and may be slightly distracted for the next few hours. They found Caden in the war room, still studying maps and force compositions. The young alpha looked up as they entered, and his nostrils flared as he scented the change in their pack dynamics. Finally, Caden signed, his mental voice carrying amused satisfaction through their stone connection. I was beginning to think you would both die of stubbornness before admitting what was obvious to every wolf with functional senses. Marcus felt his ears heat with embarrassment. Apologies for the distraction on the eve of deployment. It seemed inadvisable to ride into battle with incomplete mate bonds, causing biological disruption. Caden's expression shifted to something more serious. You have my blessing and congratulations. Also my thanks. An alpha with a mate to protect fights with focus that unmated wolves cannot match. And Elena, Having you as pack now, rather than simply ally, strengthens bonds that will matter in coming battles. The prince's formal acceptance of their mate status carried weight in pack hierarchy. As heir to the Alpha King, Caden's approval made Marcus and Elena's bond officially recognized within royal pack structure. "We should rest," Elena said practically. "Dawn comes early and the ride to Shadow Peak will be brutal." Marcus nodded agreement, though his wolf had other ideas about how newly mated alphas and omegas should spend their first night together. But discipline and duty had always taken precedence over personal desires, and they had battles to survive before they could properly establish their bond. They separated to their own quarters with the understanding that consummation would wait until they had time and safety to do it properly. Marcus lay awake in his bed, feeling Elena's presence through their new bond, sensing her own wakefulness and the desire that matched his. Tomorrow they would deploy to Shadow Peak. Tomorrow the real trial would begin. But tonight, for the first time in 5 years, Marcus fell asleep feeling like he had something to live for beyond simple survival. His mate, his prince, his pack, and enemies who had no idea what kind of alphas they had chosen to challenge. The deployment to Shadow Peak began at dawn with 800 wolves marching out of the capital in formation. Marcus rode near the front of the column, mounted on a gray warhorse whose alpha bloodline made it responsive to subtle commands. Beside him rode Caden on a bay gelding, the young prince sitting his mount with easy confidence despite never having led troops in actual combat. Elena rode on Caden's other side, her official role as healer giving her position in the command group. But every wolf in the column could sense the fresh mate bond between her and Marcus, could sense the way their pack dynamics had shifted overnight. The soldiers' reactions varied. Some showed approval that their tactical advisor had found a mate worthy of his alpha status. Others displayed skepticism that an omega, even a mated one, belonged in a command position heading toward combat. Marcus ignored both reactions. What mattered was capability, and Elena had proven hers over 3 years of successful infiltration. The journey would take 4 days of hard riding through mountain passes that grew progressively more dangerous as they approached the frontier. Marcus used the time to drill Caden on command decisions, presenting tactical scenarios that forced the young alpha to make choices without perfect information. What the prince lacked in experience, he compensated with an ability to read pack dynamics that transcended conventional training. Caden could sense which soldiers were confident and which were afraid, could identify the natural leaders among the ranks, could feel the overall morale through bonds that most alphas never learned to access consciously. On the 3rd day, they made camp in a valley 20 miles from Shadow Peak. Soldiers established watch rotations and prepared simple meals over controlled fires. Marcus walked the perimeter, checking defensive positions out of habit, even though the real threats lay ahead rather than behind. He found Caden sitting alone at the camp's edge, staring toward the mountains that hid Shadow Peak and the northern kingdom beyond. The prince held a resonance stone, its surface catching the last light of sunset. Marcus settled onto a nearby rock, and after a moment, Caden's mental voice touched his mind through their stone connection. "I am terrified," the prince admitted. "Not of dying, but of making decisions that get wolves killed. Of failing so completely that my father's faith in me proves to have been delusion rather than insight." "Every alpha feels this before first command," Marcus sent back. "I vomited twice before my first battle. Your Uncle Valen apparently tried to resign his commission the night before his first independent command. Fear is recognition of responsibility, not weakness. But you had years to develop your skills before commanding in actual combat. I have days. You have capabilities I did not," Marcus corrected. "You read pack dynamics with accuracy that seems supernatural. You coordinate through bonds that transcend voice commands. You see patterns that conventional thinkers miss. These are strengths, Caden. Different does not mean lesser." The prince was quiet for a long moment. Through their bond, Marcus could feel Elena approaching from behind, her omega presence calming the tension that had been building. She settled beside them and addressed Caden directly. "Your Highness, I have served in this palace for 3 years. I have watched nobles and generals and advisors debate pack hierarchy and dominance. Most of them equate loud with strong, aggressive with capable. They are wrong." Her voice carried conviction that made both alphas listen. "The strongest wolves I have known are the ones who understand that true dominance comes from inspiring loyalty rather than demanding submission. Your father is dying, but wolves still follow him because they respect his judgment and trust his leadership. That is the kind of alpha you can become if you trust your own strengths rather than trying to copy others' methods. Caden's scent shifted, anxiety fading as Elena's words resonated. "Thank you," he signed, then sent mentally, "for treating me like an alpha rather than a problem to solve." "You are welcome," Elena replied. "Now both of you should rest. Tomorrow we reach Shadow Peak and the real work begins." They separated to their bedrolls, and Marcus lay beside Elena under stars that seemed too peaceful for wolves heading toward war. Through their mate bond, he could feel her warmth, could sense her steady breathing, could know without words that she was as aware of him as he was of her. "Thank you," he sent through their private connection, "for choosing me despite all the reasons you should not have." Elena's response carried gentle amusement. "I choose you because of who you are, not despite it. Now sleep, Alpha mine. You need rest before we face what is coming." Marcus closed his eyes and let Elena's presence through their bond soothe the anxiety that 5 years of grief had made his constant companion. Tomorrow they would reach Shadow Peak. Tomorrow the trial would truly begin. But tonight, he was a mated alpha with pack to protect and purpose to serve. And that, he was discovering, made all the difference between surviving and actually living. Shadow Peak Garrison rose from the mountain like a piece of the stone itself, gray walls blending with gray rock, positioned to control the pass that separated Iron Ridge from the Northern Kingdom. 300 years it had stood without falling, a fortress that represented the kingdom's northern shield. Captain Hendricks commanded the permanent garrison, a veteran beta in his 50s whose scent carried competence and cautious optimism. He met them at the gates with 500 troops assembled in formation, their discipline evident in their silent attention. "Prince Caden," Hendricks said formally, saluting with proper respect. "Shadow Peak Garrison stands ready for your command. We have received your orders to prepare for potential Northern Kingdom assault. Defensive positions are being reinforced and supplies are being stockpiled." Caden's response came through sign language that his translator conveyed clearly. The prince thanks Captain Hendricks for the garrison's preparation and professionalism. He asks for immediate briefing on current intelligence regarding Northern Kingdom movements and garrison capabilities. Hendricks led them to the command center, where maps covered every wall showing approaches and defensive positions with exquisite detail. The northern frontier was marked with observation post locations and recent sighting reports. "As of this morning, Northern forces continue massing 40 miles north of our position," Hendricks explained. "Estimated strength is 38,000 troops with siege equipment visible. They have not crossed into our territory yet, but their positioning suggests they are preparing for major offensive operations." Marcus studied the maps while his tactical mind processed force compositions and approach vectors. This was not a raiding force but an invasion army, complete with supply trains and field hospitals that indicated planning for sustained campaign. "What is your defensive plan if they attack?" Caden signed. Hendricks outlined standard doctrine. Hold the walls, use choke points to negate numerical advantage, rely on superior defensive positions to offset enemy numbers. It was conventional, proven, and exactly what War Chief Ragnar would expect. Marcus watched Caden process this information, could sense through their growing pack bond the moment when the young alpha decided to implement something unprecedented. The prince's hands moved in rapid sign language. "We will not fight conventional defense. We will use resonance stone network to coordinate troops in ways the enemy cannot predict. We will turn apparent weaknesses into strengths and make them question every assumption about how we fight." Hendricks looked uncertain. "Your Highness, Shadow Peak's defenses have held for 3 centuries using proven methods. Experimenting with untested tactics against overwhelming force seems unnecessarily risky." Marcus stepped forward in support of his prince. "Captain, War Chief Ragnar has studied Iron Ridge defensive doctrine for 30 years. He knows exactly how we fight because we always fight the same way. Predictability is vulnerability when facing superior numbers. But if we coordinate through pack bonds that conventional commanders cannot access, we create uncertainty that undermines numerical advantage." Hendricks studied Caden with new assessment, his beta instincts reading the young alpha's determination and confidence. "Your Highness, You ask 800 wolves to trust methods they have never trained with, commanded by a prince they have never served under, against an enemy that outnumbers us 40 to 1. Caden's response carried alpha authority that transcended his years. I ask them to trust excellence over familiarity, to believe that innovation can triumph over tradition when innovation is executed properly, and to have faith that their prince sees possibilities they have not imagined yet. The captain was quiet for a long moment, his scent carrying thoughtful calculation. Then he did something that Marcus had not expected. He placed his fist over his heart in the formal gesture of pack acceptance. Your Highness, Shadow Peak Garrison is yours to command. We will follow your orders and trust your vision. Show us these new methods and we will learn them. Caden's smile was fierce as he returned the gesture. Then let us begin. We have days before Ragnar moves. Days to prepare for warfare that will test everything we believe about strength and leadership and what it means to be pack. The resonance stones arrived that evening, 50 stones total, carried by royal courier under heavy guard. Elena unpacked them carefully, while garrison wolves watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. To conventional soldiers, these looked like polished jade spheres with silver inlay. The idea that pretty rocks could revolutionize warfare seemed like fantasy. But when Caden demonstrated by connecting to multiple soldiers simultaneously, by showing them how he could share tactical awareness and coordinate responses faster than thought, skepticism began shifting to cautious interest. Volunteers stepped forward, squad leaders and unit commanders willing to try something new. By nightfall, Caden had 50 wolves connected through the stone network, each one able to receive tactical direction and coordinate with their units through bonds deeper than voice. Marcus watched the training with professional satisfaction. This was what true leadership looked like. Not alpha dominating through force, but alpha inspiring through vision and earning trust through demonstrated capability. Elena appeared beside him as full darkness settled, her Omega presence immediately soothing the tension he had been carrying. Through their mate bond, he could feel her satisfaction with the day's progress. They have a chance, she sent privately. If Ragnar gives us time to prepare, if the traitor does not sabotage from within, if a dozen other factors align properly, Caden can actually hold this fortress. Too many ifs, Marcus sent back. But we work with what we have. And what we have is a brilliant young alpha, 800 willing wolves, and innovation that our enemies will not expect. They stood together watching Caden work with his stone bearers, teaching pack coordination that went deeper than traditional hierarchy. And Marcus allowed himself to hope that perhaps, despite overwhelming odds, they might actually survive what was coming. The trial by fire was beginning, and perhaps this time, unlike Northern Pass, he could bring everyone home alive. The attack came at midnight on the second day after their arrival, not from Northern Kingdom forces, but from within Shadow Peak itself. Marcus woke to Elena's distress through their mate bond, her Omega fear spiking with intensity that brought his alpha fully awake in seconds. Assassins, she sent through their connection. Multiple contacts moving toward Prince Caden's quarters with military precision. Marcus was armed and moving before conscious thought processed the information. His alpha senses cataloged everything. The scent signatures of wolves who did not belong in this corridor. The particular ozone smell that marked alphas preparing for violence. And underneath it all, a scent he recognized from palace interactions. Commander Darius. The traitor had come personally to eliminate the prince who threatened to expose his conspiracy. Marcus reached Caden's quarters to find 5 of the prince's guards down, dead or dying. 3 more fought desperately against attackers who moved with elite precision. And in the center of it all, Caden himself defended with skill that Marcus had trained into him, using narrow confines to negate numerical advantage. But 16 years old against hardened killers was mathematics that did not favor the young alpha, no matter how brilliant his tactical mind. Marcus hit the melee like a thunderstorm breaking. 40 years of combat experience compressed into focused violence that left no room for mercy or hesitation. His alpha dominance rolled over the beta attackers, making them hesitate for critical fractions of seconds that became the difference between living and dying. Elena arrived moments later, her Omega scent carrying the steel that marked healers who understood that sometimes saving lives required taking them. She fought with intelligence core training that emphasized efficiency over strength, finding vulnerabilities and exploiting them with surgical precision. Together, Marcus and Elena broke the assault in less than 2 minutes. 6 attackers dead, 2 captured, Caden's quarters secured. But through the resonant stone network, Marcus could feel other attacks happening simultaneously throughout the fortress. Sabotage attempts on supply depots, strikes on key defensive positions. This was coordinated chaos designed to overwhelm defenders and create opportunities in confusion. Caden's hands moved rapidly as he connected to his 50 stone bearers, his mental voice touching each one with tactical direction that adapted in real time to enemy actions. Units deployed to counter each threat, the defensive plan they had drilled transforming from theory to practice. Marcus watched the young Alpha coordinate 8 different responses simultaneously through pack bonds that transcended voice commands and felt fierce pride at seeing potential become reality. But something was wrong. Marcus's combat instincts were screaming warnings that he could not quite identify. Then Elena gasped, her hand going to her shoulder where a crossbow bolt had appeared, punching through flesh with force that spun her around. The bolt meant for Caden had taken his Omega mate instead. Marcus's world narrowed to tunnel vision focused on Elena's pain. His Alpha howled with rage and fear as he caught her before she fell, feeling her blood hot against his hands. Through their mate bond, her agony flooded into him with intensity that made his own shoulder throb in sympathetic response. From the shadows 30 feet away, a familiar voice called out, "You should have stayed retired, Kane. This did not need to involve you." Commander Darius stepped into torchlight, crossbow already reloaded and aimed at Caden. The traitor was an Alpha in his late 50s, worn down by decades of carrying secrets that had poisoned everything he touched. His scent carried madness and desperation in equal measure. Marcus carefully lowered Elena to the ground, his hands trembling as he assessed her wound. The bolt had punched through her shoulder, painful but not immediately fatal if treated quickly. Through their bond, he sent reassurance and love and promises that she would survive this. Then he stood and turned his full Alpha attention on Darius. "You poisoned King Theron. You got my son killed. You forfeited any right to mercy." "Garrett died because you were careless," Darius replied, his Alpha presence aggressive and challenging. "I just provided intelligence to the Northern Kingdom. You led him into the ambush." The words were designed to wound, to destabilize Marcus emotionally. They might have worked 5 years ago when guilt consumed him. But he had found purpose again, had claimed a mate worth protecting, had learned that carrying grief did not mean surrendering to it. Garrett died a hero, saving his Alpha's life. Marcus's voice was deadly calm. "You will die a traitor whose conspiracy failed. The only question is how much you suffer first." He attacked with speed that gave Darius no time to think, no space to plan. 40 years of experience against 35 years of treachery. Alpha dominance against desperate madness. The kind of combat that ended quickly and violently. Their clash sent dominance waves rolling through the fortress, making every wolf aware that Alphas were fighting for supremacy. Darius was skilled and desperate, fighting with the knowledge that capture meant execution. But Marcus fought with the primal fury of a mated Alpha protecting his pack, and that made him unstoppable. Behind Marcus, Caden knelt beside Elena, using his resonance stone to share his Alpha presence with her, keeping the Omega conscious and focused through pain that would have overwhelmed lesser wolves. The prince's mental voice touched Marcus, even as he coordinated the fortress's defense. "End this quickly. We still have battles to fight, and I need my tactical advisor functional, not consumed by revenge." The words cut through Marcus's rage, reminding him that he was not just a mated Alpha, but a soldier with responsibilities beyond personal vengeance. He adjusted his approach, sacrificing satisfying violence for efficient conclusion. 3 more exchanges, and Marcus had Darius disarmed and bleeding from a dozen wounds. The traitor collapsed against stone walls, his breathing labored, his Alpha presence fading as shock and injury took their toll. "Why?" Marcus demanded. "Why betray everything for foreign gold?" Darius's laugh was wet and painful. "Not gold. Revenge. Your king's grandfather destroyed my homeland, annexed our territory, killed everyone I loved. I spent 3 decades earning trust so I could spend years bleeding Iron Ridge slowly. It was madness wrapped in grievance, the twisted logic of someone who had sacrificed everything to hatred." Marcus felt no pity, only grim recognition that this particular poison had finally been cut from the kingdom's body. "You failed," Marcus said coldly. "Prince Caden lives. Your conspiracy is exposed. You accomplished nothing except proving that betrayal destroys the betrayer more than their targets. Darius's smile was terrible. I killed Queen Margot. Spent 2 years poisoning her slowly. Theron watched his mate die and never knew I was responsible. That is not nothing. The confession hit like physical force, revealing depths of treachery that went back over a decade. But before Marcus could respond, Caden's mental voice touched both alphas through the resonant stone network. Enough. Darius's confession is recorded through the stones. War Chief Ragnar will receive proof that he was manipulated. Now we focus on surviving what comes next. Marcus wanted to make Darius's death slower, wanted to extract payment for every betrayal. But Caden was right. They had larger battles ahead. He ended the traitor's life with single efficient strike, then turned his attention to what mattered. Elena, his mate, wounded protecting their prince. The garrison's healers were already working on her, carefully removing the bolt and packing the wound. Through their mate bond, Marcus could feel her pain and her determination in equal measure. She would survive. Omegas were tougher than most alphas gave them credit for, and Elena was tougher than most Omegas. You saved the prince, Marcus sent through their private connection. My brave, foolish, perfect mate. Someone had to, Elena sent back, her mental voice weak but carrying dry humor. You were busy killing assassins, division of labor. Marcus stayed beside her as healers worked, his alpha presence wrapping around her like protection against everything that threatened his Omega. Around them, Shadow Peak was securing from internal assault. Casualties were being tended. Dead were being gathered. The fortress had survived betrayal from within, but the larger threat still loomed beyond the walls. 38,000 Northern Kingdom troops preparing to attack, and now they had to transform this defensive victory into something larger. They had to convince War Chief Ragnar that he had been deceived. 3 days later, Marcus stood beside Caden in neutral ground between Shadow Peak and the Northern Army. They had come under flag of truce with 20 guards, close enough to retreat if treachery was attempted, but far enough to demonstrate good faith. War Chief Ragnar Stormborn was everything his reputation suggested. Early 50s, built like a mountain, with gray streaking through dark hair and scars that spoke of 3 decades fighting on frontiers where mercy was weakness. His alpha presence was massive and aggressive, the kind of dominance that made lesser wolves submit through proximity alone. But Caden did not submit. The young prince met Ragnar's alpha challenge with his own presence, condensed and focused, proving that dominance came in forms tradition had not imagined. Ragnar's eyes widened slightly as he scented Caden's true alpha strength. You are the silent prince, the deaf boy that Iron Ridge nobles claim is unfit to lead. Caden's response came through his translator, but his alpha presence carried the words with unmistakable authority. I am deaf, but unfitness is judgment made by wolves with limited imagination. I suggest War Chief Ragnar is intelligent enough to form his own conclusions rather than accepting other people's assessments. Ragnar's laugh was unexpected and genuine. Bold words from someone I could crush with fraction of my forces. I like you, boy. It will be a shame to kill you. Before that happens, Marcus interjected, perhaps you would be interested in knowing why you are actually here. Why someone wanted you to invade Iron Ridge at this specific moment. Over the next hour, they presented evidence. Elena, her shoulder still bandaged, but her Omega presence steady, provided decoded communications showing that intelligence about Iron Ridge's supposed offensive preparations had come from single source. Commander Darius, who had been feeding information to Northern contacts for years. Caden showed tactical analyses, proving that troop movements Ragnar had been told were offensive preparations were actually defensive redeployments. Marcus explained operational details that only someone with access to actual plans would know, revealing how Darius had manipulated both kingdoms into conflict. The circle of cause and effect became clear. Darius had fed Ragnar false intelligence. Ragnar had mobilized in response. Darius had used that mobilization to justify Iron Ridge deployments. A self-reinforcing cycle that benefited only the traitor who set it in motion. Ragnar listened with expression that grew increasingly dark. When they finished, the war chief was silent for a long moment, his alpha presence radiating controlled fury. Why should I believe any of this? He finally asked. You are desperate, outnumbered, facing certain defeat. Of course you would invent conspiracies. Caden signed, and his translator conveyed the prince's answer. Because you are a warrior who has fought Iron Ridge forces for 30 years. In all those battles, have we ever initiated aggression? Have we ever broken treaties? Our doctrine has always been defensive. Why would King Theron suddenly abandon decades of consistent policy? Ragnar considered this, his tactical mind processing the question's validity. The war chief pulled out a map and spread it on ground between them. Show me these deployments you claim were defensive. For the next hour, they went through detailed analysis. Caden demonstrated through positions and timing that every Iron Ridge movement had been reactive. Elena provided documentation. Marcus explained tactical details that matched what Ragnar had been told, but from perspective that revealed defensive rather than aggressive intent. Most convincingly, they played Darius's recorded confession through the resonance stones, letting Ragnar hear the traitor admit to decades of manipulation in his own words. Ragnar studied evidence with focus of commander, whose reputation depended on accurate assessment. Finally, he looked at Caden with expression that had shifted from hostility to something approaching respect. If what you say is true, then I have been manipulated into invading ally by someone who benefited from our mutual destruction. That is unacceptable to warrior's honor. Caden signed response. The prince understands that War Chief Ragnar cannot simply withdraw based on one conversation. He suggests different approach. Maintain siege positions but delay assault. When you have verified the intelligence we provided, when you have confirmed through your own sources that Darius betrayed both kingdoms, then we can negotiate proper peace. It was brilliant tactical thinking. Ragnar could not retreat without losing face. But he could delay, could claim he was ensuring complete victory rather than wasting soldiers on hasty assault. Ragnar considered the proposal, his strategic mind working through implications. How long? 1 week to verify intelligence and confirm Darius's network has been eliminated. 7 days to prove we speak truth. And if your proof is insufficient, then you proceed with assault and we defend to last wolf. No surrender, no retreat. We give you the glorious battle that warriors respect even as they regret its necessity. Ragnar looked at Marcus. You vouch for this prince's honor? You stake your reputation on his word? Marcus met the war chief's eyes with alpha certainty. I vouch for Prince Caden absolutely. He has more honor in 16 years than most wolves accumulate in lifetimes. If he says he will provide proof, he will deliver it or die trying. Ragnar nodded slowly. Very well. 7 days. I will maintain siege but will not assault unless provoked. But know this, Prince Caden. If you deceive me, if this is merely delaying tactic, I will not offer honorable terms again. Caden's response carried absolute confidence. War Chief Ragnar will not need to make that choice. We will deliver truth. They returned to Shadow Peak with reprieve bought at cost of impossible promise. 7 days to verify evidence. 7 days before Ragnar's patience ended. But Marcus had fought impossible battles before. And this time, he had advantages that Northern Pass had lacked. A brilliant young alpha who saw patterns others missed. An Omega mate whose intelligence core training provided resources conventional soldiers never accessed. And pack bonds that transcended traditional hierarchy. The verification came faster than expected. Elena's network within Intelligence Corps confirmed Darius's communications with Northern contacts. Ragnar's own spies, now directed to investigate rather than simply report, uncovered evidence of manipulation. The traitor's conspiracy unraveled under scrutiny from both kingdoms. On the 5th day, Ragnar requested another meeting. This time, his expression carried grim satisfaction rather than hostility. Your evidence is verified, the war chief said without preamble. Commander Darius betrayed both our kingdoms, used our mutual distrust to create conflict that served only his revenge. This cannot stand. Caden signed response. The prince proposes we transform this crisis into opportunity. Not merely peace, but treaty. Formal borders and trade agreements, ambassadors in each other's capitals, mechanisms for resolving future disputes without military confrontation. It was vision that went beyond simple conflict resolution to creating framework for lasting peace. Ragnar studied the young alpha with new respect. You think strategically, not just tactically. Your father raised you well. Caden's next words, conveyed through translator but carrying alpha authority, made history. My father is dying. When he passes, I will inherit kingdom that has been at peace with Northern Kingdom for 30 years. I prefer not to begin my reign by fighting war that should never have started. Let us build something better." Ragnar was quiet for a long moment. Then he extended his hand in gesture that transcended pack politics and international relations. "Let us build peace worthy of warriors' honor." Caden took the offered hand, and two alphas, who should have been enemies, became architects of something unprecedented. Not just cessation of hostilities, but genuine alliance built on mutual respect and recognition that their kingdoms shared more interests than conflicts. Over the next week, they hammered out treaty terms, formal borders, trade agreements, ambassadors, dispute resolution mechanisms. It was not perfect, but it was progress that transformed crisis into genuine opportunity. On the 14th day, exactly 2 weeks after deployment from the capital, Ragnar's army withdrew. Not in defeat, but in mutual recognition that war between their kingdoms served neither's interests. Marcus stood on Shadow Peak's walls watching them march home, feeling weight lift from shoulders that had carried too much for too long. Beside him stood Caden, the young alpha who had achieved through innovation and intelligence what conventional commanders never could have accomplished. "You did well," Marcus said quietly. "Better than anyone expected, including me." Caden signed response. "I had good teachers who believed in me when belief was hard, and I had pack who were willing to try new methods even when tradition said they would fail." Through their resonant stone connection, Marcus felt the prince's satisfaction and exhaustion in equal measure. Caden had proven himself to every skeptic, had demonstrated that different did not mean lesser. But there was no triumph in his expression, only awareness that this had been one trial among many still to come. Elena appeared beside them, her shoulder healing well despite the severity of her wound. Her Omega presence immediately soothed the tension that both alphas carried. Through their mate bond, Marcus felt her pride and love and fierce satisfaction at their survival. "The return to capital will be triumphant," she observed. "The prince who negotiated peace and exposed the traitor who corrupted the kingdom." Caden's expression shifted to something more serious. "Triumph is premature. My father is dying. The real test comes when I must rule without his guidance. Then you will have loyal alphas and capable omegas around you," Marcus said firmly. "Pack who will support and advise you. You will not face the future alone." They stood together as sunset painted the mountains gold, and Shadow Peak settled into peace that had been earned through courage and innovation. The trial by fire was complete. The silent alpha had proven his worth beyond any doubt. Now came the harder part, transforming battlefield success into sustainable leadership. The journey back to capital took 4 days, and news of their success preceded them. Crowds lined the streets cheering for the prince who had negotiated peace and exposed betrayal. Caden rode at Column's head, accepting acclaim with grace that suggested he understood the difference between celebration and actual achievement. King Theron waited in palace courtyard, held upright by sheer will despite illness consuming him. When he saw Caden alive and whole, something broke in the king's control. He embraced his son with desperate strength, no longer caring who witnessed royal vulnerability. "You did it," Theron whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "You proved them all wrong." Caden signed response against his father's shoulder. "I proved nothing except that you chose to see my strengths instead of focusing on perceived weaknesses. Everything I accomplished came from foundation you built." Marcus watched the reunion, feeling Garrett's absence like wound that would never fully heal. But alongside pain was something else. Satisfaction that he had helped Caden survive where Garrett had not. Purpose found in mentorship and service. That evening, Theron summoned Marcus and Elena to private study. The king looked exhausted but genuinely happy for first time since Marcus had returned to capital. "You serve me well, old friend," Theron said. "Serve my son even better. Iron Ridge is in your debt." Marcus shook his head. "You gave me purpose when I had none. If there is debt, I owe payment." "Then consider debt discharged." Theron's smile was bittersweet. "I have perhaps 3 months left. Wolf's Bane has done damage that cannot be undone. I need to ensure that when I am gone, Caden has advisors who will serve him as loyally as you served me." It was not question, but Marcus answered anyway. "I will serve Prince Caden until he tells me my service is no longer needed or death makes choice for us both." Theron nodded, satisfied. He turned to Elena. "Colonel Ashford, your investigation exposed conspiracy that operated for decades. You have my gratitude and my apology for requiring such deep cover for so long." Elena inclined her head. The cover was necessary, Your Majesty. And some benefits were unexpected. She glanced at Marcus, her scent carrying warmth and affection that made their mate bond obvious. Indeed. Theron's expression carried approval. I am creating new positions. Lord Commander of Iron Ridge Forces and Royal Spymaster, both answerable only to the Crown. Marcus, Elena, I would be honored if you would accept these responsibilities and guide my son when I am no longer here to do so. They accepted with formal oaths that bound them to Caden's service. And as they left the king's study, Marcus felt the future settling into place with weight that was somehow lighter than the past he had been carrying. 3 months later, King Theron Ironwood died peacefully in his sleep, his wolf finally too weak to sustain him. The kingdom mourned a king who had ruled with wisdom and strength for 30 years. But the mourning was tempered by confidence in his heir. Prince Caden's coronation took place on a clear spring morning when the mountains seemed to touch the sky. The ceremony was magnificent, traditional in proper ways, innovative in elements that mattered. When crowns settled on Caden's head, the new king did not speak words no one could hear. Instead, he held high a resonance stone and shared his thoughts with every wolf in Cathedral simultaneously. What they felt was not just determination or duty, it was genuine love for kingdom and its people, commitment to serve rather than rule. Understanding that leadership meant sacrifice and that power was responsibility rather than privilege. Marcus felt tears on his cheeks and did not try to hide them. Beside him, Elena wept openly, her hand clasped in his. Around them, Cathedral erupted in cheers for their silent king, who had proven that wisdom spoke louder than words. That evening, after celebrations finally quieted, Marcus found himself in palace gardens thinking about Garrett and Theron and all the friends and soldiers lost over 40 years of service. Caden found him there, as if sensing when his Lord Commander needed company. The young king sat beside Marcus on garden bench and signed simple question. Are you all right? Marcus signed back. I am thinking about people who are not here, missing them, wishing they could have seen this day. Caden pulled out journal and wrote, then turned it so Marcus could read. My father died believing I would be good king. Your son died knowing you were great Alpha. They are not here, but their belief in us lives on through what we accomplish. That is how we honor them, by being worthy of faith they had in us. Marcus read words twice, feeling truth settle in bones. Then he clasped Caden's shoulder in warrior's greeting that had become their private language. Thank you, he signed, for giving broken Alpha reason to live again. Caden's smile was bright as sunrise. Thank you for teaching Silent Prince that different was not same as less. Elena appeared from shadows, her Omega presence wrapping around both Alphas with calming influence. She settled beside Marcus, and he pulled her close, feeling their mate bond pulse with contentment. They sat together watching stars emerge over the capital, 3 wolves bound by pack loyalty and genuine affection. Around them, kingdoms settled into peace that had been earned through courage and innovation. Marcus had lost son and king he had served for 40 years, but he had gained mate worth treasuring and young Alpha worth following. The broken pieces of his past had somehow assembled into future worth fighting for. The old Alpha and the young king, together with the Omega, who had chosen to bind herself to their pack. They would face whatever came next. And perhaps, Marcus thought, as Elena's warmth seeped into his bones and Caden's quiet strength radiated through their bond, that would be enough. The silent king would rule with wisdom that transcended words. The mated Alphas would serve with loyalty that transcended duty. And together they would build kingdom where strength came in forms tradition had never imagined. Where different was not lesser but simply another path to excellence. Where wolves were judged by their capability rather than their volume. Where a deaf Alpha could rule an empire and prove that true dominance came from inspiring loyalty rather than demanding submission. Marcus closed his eyes and let peace settle over him for first time in 5 years. Garrett's death would always hurt. Theron's absence would always be felt. But alongside grief was something stronger. Purpose, pack, love. And maybe, just maybe, that was what redemption actually looked like.